Welcome to the Smarter Science of Slim, the scientifically proven program where you eat more and exercise less to burn fat and boost health.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Today is nothing short of a blockbuster show, a hard-hitting subject from an awesome man, author, professor, and doctor, something that I know is going to hit home for all of us, if not personally, someone in our family. Let's just get right into it. Our guest today, Dr. John Abramson, served as a family physician for over 2 decades. He's been on the faculty at the Harvard Medical School for 15 years, where he's taught primary care and currently teaches healthcare policy. He also served 7 years as the chairperson of the Department of Family Practice at Leahy Clinic at Burlington, Massachusetts. He consults as an expert in litigation involving the pharmaceutical industry and has served as an unpaid consultant to the FBI and the Department of Justice. Now, therein you can see why we have him on the show, because his insights into the pharmaceutical industry, and specifically in authoring the wonderful book, Overdosed America, The Broken Promise of American Medicine, Dr. Abramson draws on his background in statistics, epidemiology, and health policy to reveal the ways in which drug companies have misrepresented statistical evidence, misled doctors, and compromised our health. However, the good news, which we will get into today, is that the best scientific evidence shows that, as we know, that reclaiming responsibility for our own health is far more effective than taking the latest blockbuster drug. Dr. Abramson, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Dr. Abramson, let's start from the very beginning. Obviously, you wrote Overdosed America. It's this wonderful book. You've got 5 stars on Amazon. It's blowing the roof off of things that a lot of us would never even fathom. Before we get into the book, though, what started you on this journey to dig into what's going on in the pharmaceutical industry?
That's a great question, Jonathan, because it's really an unplanned journey. I was a family doctor and quite happy as a family doctor, and was teaching a course at Harvard Medical School to medical students about mind-body medicine, healing, and spirituality. And in that course, I was trying to help medical students understand that being a good doctor requires being in 2 metaphysical frameworks at the same time. The framework of science, where you look at the external world objectively and measure it and test it, and the metaphysical perspective of subjectivity or soulfulness or consciousness or spirit. And I was trying to help medical students who just get barraged with science and learn the implied view of reality, that science is really the truth and subjectivity or soulfulness is a very secondary level of reality and secondary concern in healthcare. I was trying to explain to medical students that to be a good doctor, you have to work in both realms simultaneously. It's almost never that good medicine is practiced entirely in the scientific realm or entirely in the intersubjective realm. And as I was granted myself a year leave from my practice to write a book that would help medical students understand this, I got into the data in the FDA's website about the arthritis drug Vioxx. There was an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association that wasn't a particularly strong article, but had a footnote that brought me into a website within the FDA that you couldn't possibly find on your own, that showed that the arthritis drug Vioxx, which was a huge blockbuster drug, was really a killer drug. And in fact, that it was killing approximately 40,000 Americans, almost as many Americans as died in the Vietnam War, under the guise of being a safer drug because it caused fewer gastrointestinal complications. It was really causing far more heart attacks and strokes and blood clots. And when I understood that, I tried to explain to my colleagues, to the press, to television, to magazines, that the information that doctors had about Vioxx was not correct. The information that had been published in one of our most prestigious medical journals was not correct. And people just couldn't accept that that might be true. They thought I was nuts. And when I couldn't get that story out and had been trained to understand research and statistics and epidemiology and knew that these facts were true, I decided to leave that first book about helping medical students to understand that treating their patients as people is important and go and switch books, which led to Overdosed America, to explain to people that the information upon which even the best doctors rely to make their medical decisions is tainted and has no more integrity than the advertisements you see on TV.
And Dr. Abramson, that is such a powerful message. And when we step back and we think about, I don't know, this is not like an evil empire type thing. It's just there are companies, their job is to make money. Their job is not to help us run in fields and play on the beach as the commercials would advertise. Their job is to make money. And it seems as though sometimes this pursuit of making money comes at the expense of our health rather than at the benefit of our health. Is that correct?
That's absolutely true. And there are really two issues involved here. One is that as a society, we very quietly made the decision in the 1970s and 80s to privatize the production of medical knowledge. So prior to the mid-70s, most researchers, medical researchers who wanted to do research could apply for a grant to the National Institutes of Health and more often than not get funded and be able to do research based on the health consequences of the issue in question. What happened is that the funding, the public funding for clinical trials got radically cut starting in the late 70s, and then when President Reagan took office in 1980 with a mandate to downsize government and a bad economy, the funding for clinical trials at the NIH got radically cut. So during the years between 1977 and 1990, the funding for clinical trials by private industry, by the pharmaceutical industry, went up sixfold. So what we did in changing the way medical science is funded is we changed the fundamental purpose of medical science without acknowledging that that happened. So instead of medical science being a public good whose fundamental mission is to figure out how best and most effectively and efficiently improve the public's health, we made that transition that you referred to, where medical science became a tool for corporations to achieve their fiduciary goals, which is to make money, not health. So that's one issue, is the purpose of our medical knowledge changed, though the structures that oversee the integrity of medical knowledge didn't change commensurately, so that the oversight of this research was sorely lacking, much like the oversight of the mortgage-backed securities that caused the economic crisis of a few years ago. So step one is that the fundamental fiduciary purpose of medical knowledge changed when the funding was privatized. Now, step two is that there's law breaking going on. It's fairly commonplace now for scientific research to be misrepresented in an unlawful way. And the problem is that our legal system is not structured in a way that has penalties that create a disincentive to break the law. So that even in the worst drug debacles, the drug companies haven't yet lost money and nobody's gone to jail. And an example of the kind of law breaking that's going on, I testified, there was a 6-week trial. Kaiser Health Systems sued Pfizer, the biggest drug company in the world, for fraudulently misrepresenting scientific evidence about its drug Neurontin. And Kaiser alleged in this lawsuit that it purchased $47 million worth of Neurontin based upon fraudulent misrepresentations by Pfizer, and it wanted its money back. So this trial lasted 6 weeks in federal court. I testified for a day and a half in this trial. And the jury in federal court, this is 2010, found that Pfizer, the world's largest drug company, was not only guilty of fraud, but was guilty of racketeering violations, RICO violations. So the biggest drug company in the world was found guilty in federal court of racketeering violations, the law that was made to constrain organized crimes activities. Unfortunately, very few people know this happened. So that the power of the finding of the jury that the biggest drug company in the world was guilty of fraud and racketeering has not had an impact on the public consciousness, either in healthcare consumers or in doctors, as a huge red flag warning that the integrity of what we believe to be our medical knowledge can no longer be trusted.
Dr. Abramson, I so appreciate you bringing this message and dedicating your life to educating us on this, because I can imagine there's been some blowback, and I want to get into that. But before we do, I want to give a quick disclaimer. Maybe not a disclaimer, but sometimes people, when they hear things like this, they're like, oh, conspiracy theory, and they tune out. Folks, I just to back up, remember, our guest today, Dr. Abramson, he is a clinical faculty member at the Harvard Medical School. He is an unpaid consultant to the FBI and the Department of Justice. His recent academic article titled Clinical Trial Data is a Public Good was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association last year, 2012. He, of course, is the author of the book Overdosed America. I mention that only because this is not a conspiracy theory. If you look at our society, our culture, how sick we are, how we believe sickness is just the new normal. Like, we believe that it's just standard care to get older and have to take all these medications and to feel terrible. Something horribly wrong has to be going on for us to think that's normal. And what Dr. Abramson, I believe, is doing such a good job explaining is one element of how broken the system is that has yielded a population that has a 100,000% increase in the rates of diabetes, that sees over 2/3 of us being overweight, that has over 40 million of our children under the age of 5 being overweight. So it's a very broken system. It's not a conspiracy. Dr. Abramson, great guy. Thank you for your work. Keep going. Keep going. Tell us more.
Well, thanks. Well, all right, let's keep going. Exactly what you're talking about. There was an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association within the last couple of years that explained why so many Americans are taking blood pressure medicine. It provided the history of vision. It used to be, up until the early 1980s, that high blood pressure was considered to be above 160 over 100. And there were 3 meetings that were sponsored by the World Health Organization in the early 1980s that led to the definition of high blood pressure coming down from 160 over 100 to 140 over 90. And then there were guidelines that were issued in the United States that said optimal blood pressure is 120 over 80. And many people, virtually all doctors, will treat blood pressures that are above 140 over 90. And many doctors will treat those blood pressures down towards a goal of 120 over 80. That's the way medicine is practiced in the United States. Now, the truth is that the 3 and this is published in JAMA. The truth is that the 3 meetings that were held by the World Health Organization in the early 1980s were all sponsored by the pharmaceutical industry. And there was not evidence at that time that treating a blood pressure under 160 over 100 provided a clinical benefit. On an epidemiological basis, it's better to have a lower blood pressure. But there was no evidence that getting down there with drugs was beneficial. So 140 over 90 became the law of the land. Any doctor who didn't treat a patient with a blood pressure over 140 over 90 became a bad doctor. And then the JNC guidelines, JNC 7 guidelines for the treatment of hypertension, brought this optimal level down to 120 over 80, again, with no evidence that drug therapy to get down there was beneficial. So millions and millions of Americans are taking multiple blood pressure drugs based on these standards that doctors really have to follow, because if they don't and there's a heart attack or a stroke, these guidelines will appear in court on the other side. And yet what we've done is we've taken Americans and we've convinced them to focus on their blood pressure and take drugs instead of to live a healthy lifestyle where exercise is going to add 3.5 years to their life, and these blood pressure medicines may not add any years to their life and may actually shorten their life. What we have done is misdirected the effort of medical care away from helping people to take personal responsibility and actually improve their health to using drugs that are both expensive and have side effects. It's an expropriation. Yep.
Oh, keep going. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. What happens is there's an expropriation of our self-responsibility and self-authority to determine what a good life is that's taken over by the medical authority, the medical industry authority, but it's taken over for their purposes, not for our purposes. And what we need to do to cut to the chase is twofold, two things. One is we need to learn that 70% of our health is determined by how we live our lives, and that we make those decisions. And when you're working with your doctor, that's not a matter of numbers. It's not a matter of tracings. It's not a matter of objective science. It's a matter of working with somebody you trust to help you take control of your life. That's number one. Number two is that our medical knowledge is corrupted by corporate influence, both legal and illegal. And we need, as a society, to confront the fact that when we turn the generation of knowledge over to the market, that market has to be properly overseen or it's going to disserve society.
Dr. Abramson, how do we, as a society, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there with the personal responsibility, taking back responsibility for our health. But so often I hear personally that, for example, I'm going to continue to eat a certain way because it doesn't seem to be having an impact on me now. And even if it does, and I become diabetic, there's a pill for that. It's almost like the iPad mentality, but for our health. Like there's an app for that, there's a pill for that. So we continue to do these behaviors on the pretense that there'll be a pill for that in the future, maybe not realizing that that is maybe analogous to putting a splint on a broken leg. How do we fix that?
Yeah, it's not analogous to putting a splint on a broken leg because a splint on a broken leg works. But pills for diabetes do very little to prevent the complications of diabetes, heart attacks, strokes, amputations. The pills do a little bit to prevent eye complications, maybe a little bit to prevent kidney complications, but the major complications of diabetes are the cardiovascular complications are not prevented by pills. So the myth, we would have an interesting ethical question and a societal question if the pills actually worked and it were just a question of paying for the pills, eat all the fat and saturated fat and whatever the trans fats that you want and just take a pill and fix it. That would be an interesting social question about who should pay for the pill and so forth. The problem is that the idea that the pill works is an illusion that's created by the purveyors of medical knowledge who are largely private industry. It doesn't work. So we need to get people to understand that these magic solutions aren't magical solutions. For example, there's no evidence that cholesterol-lowering statin drugs benefit high-risk women who don't have heart disease. There's no evidence. So the idea that, I can eat what I want, I don't have to exercise, it doesn't matter how much stress I'm under, I can even smoke, and I can take a statin pill, being a woman, I can take a statin pill and it will mitigate all those risks and I'll be very happy and I can just go ahead and I don't have to exercise any self-discipline or put the energy in to change my habits. It's just plain false. If it were true, it would be an interesting question, but it's false. The scientific data does not show that the statins benefit women who don't have heart disease.
Dr. Abramson, I'm so glad that you brought up smoking in that segment because it seems like we do have a model that may be more effective, and that's the model we have around smoking. For example, I don't know of anyone yet who continues to smoke based on their anticipation of a medication which will reverse the impact that smoking has on their health. And because of that, I don't know, we also don't recommend smoking in moderation. We just say, if you smoke, these negative things happen. The way to avoid these negative things is to not smoke. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Smoking equals lung cancer, maybe to oversimplify. If you don't want lung cancer, don't smoke. Don't rely on medication. Don't do anything else. Just don't smoke. Why is it that some of these trans fats, sugar, starch, edible products, which have been shown to be as deleterious as smoking, if not more, don't get that same kind of treatment?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to add to what you said. When we say there's nothing good about smoking, if you want to optimize your health, just stop. Another part of being successful, I work very hard with my smokers as a family doc to get them to quit, because that was their number one health problem, almost always. But it's very important for people to understand that if you're a smoker, you're addicted to nicotine, and you'll always be addicted to nicotine. You can choose whether to smoke or not, but you're always going to be a nicotine addict. And I think very much analogous to that model of understanding, my name's John and I'm a nicotine addict, that when we're addicted to fats and sugars and addicted to TV and addicted to no exercise, it's very hard to make that transition. We need to understand that we have a physical addiction that we need to overcome. It ain't going to just happen someday when the skies aren't going to suddenly light up and say, okay, John, now you're going to eat a healthy diet and exercise with no effort. No, you've got to put the same effort into making those changes as people who smoke do to stop smoking. So it's not easy. We have an enormous amount of inertia, and I don't have any scientific data to show this, but I believe that people's bodies are addicted to the diet they eat, and making a transition is not easy. You're kind of going against the tide when you make a transition, but with a deep personal commitment and working with a professional who understands your, not just the challenge of the science, but your personal challenges in what the stresses are in your life and what the psychological baggage that you're carrying in your life are, that people can make these changes. Now, unfortunately, the drug industry, which is offering a solution for every problem, and they're offering solutions for things that aren't even problems, make this very hard to get the message, the exact opposite message, which is not one of personal passivity and being an intelligent consumer of scientific products. It's taking responsibility for what you do with your body in the world. That's the way we get to good health. Now, let me just say, in the United States, we're spending literally, this is not an exaggeration, $1 trillion a year of the $2.8 trillion total that we spend on healthcare. $1 trillion a year goes to healthcare that's either unnecessary or harmful. That's 50% more than the entire federal budget deficit every year on unnecessary healthcare. What we need to do is to understand that this industry is going to consume our society unless we figure out how to take personal responsibility for ourselves and our family members, and unless we figure out how to stop these false messages that are simply designed to extract as much money as they can from society rather than improve our health.
Well, Dr. Abramson, I so appreciate all the years and effort and time that you've dedicated to getting that message out. And in terms of getting that message out, what's next for you? Obviously, your book, I believe, is in its third edition. Again, that book is Overdosed America. Find it anywhere books are sold. You can also learn more about it at overdosedamerica.com. But what's next?
What's next is another book, and the book that I'm going to write is about the very issues we're talking about here, that we're at a crisis in our society with our health and with the entire direction of how we consume our precious resources in society. And we've got to understand that the market system, I don't know a better system than a market system, But if we're going to work in a market-based society, there needs to be oversight of the integrity of the information that the experts rely on. And that's a major problem. I'm continuing to teach and lecture. I continue to work as an expert in pharmaceutical litigation because that's the only place where the real truth comes out. If you want to know the real truth about the science, you need to have access to the corporate hard drives of the companies that sponsor that science. So as in my work in litigation, I get to be kind of a scientific detective and figure out what happened. Now, some of that work I can't talk about because it remains sealed, but some, like the Neurontin trial, which when a trial actually goes forward in public, then the documents become unsealed, and I can talk about it the way I talked about it on the radio. So the mission that I have is to try to help people to understand that if they want to improve their own health, they've got to take personal responsibility, and that as a society, we are now ailing and are going to get sicker and sicker unless we can recapture our healthcare system and refocus it on improving our health most effectively and efficiently. And if we don't do that, much like the global warming problem, as a society, we are not going to thrive, and we may not, our days may be numbered. As a society with a middle class, the way we're used to living in a free America.
Dr. Abramson, brilliant, and thank you, folks. Again, his name is Dr. John Abramson. He is a member of the clinical faculty at the Harvard Medical School. He is the author of the book Overdosed America, The Broken Promise of American Medicine. Dr. Abramson, thank you so much for your time today.
It's been a pleasure talking with you, Jonathan.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, and please remember, this week and every week after, especially after hearing what Dr. Abramson told us today, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Chat with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet.
You can get fabulous free SANE recipes over at carriebrown.com.
And don't forget your 100% free eating and exercise quick start program, as well as free, fun, daily tips delivered right into your inbox at bailorgroup.com. That's BAILOR group.com.